welcome each and every one. I'm Jimmy Haley. So some of you know me, some of you don't. But so I do a lot of tours through the cemeteries and around town, and sometimes private tours if you call me and ask me. And so it is the Halloween season. It's second Saturday downtown. So we usually like to do something to bring people together and bring a few more folks downtown and stroll in the streets. And so I always say, I try not to make it too spooky, but we just try to give you some stories. And sometimes it's you draw the conclusion you wish to at the end of it. And so as a little kid, my grandmother was notorious for telling ghost stories. How many of them were true? I don't know, but they sounded good to me. And so, some of them were personal experiences, and some of them were told to her as a small child.
Grace Family Pharmacy announces new medication packaging service. It provides a simpler, safer medication experience through convenient, personalized packaging using the latest in pharmacy robotics. We're located at 357 West Main Street. Our phone number is 931-473-6418.
McMinnville, you're a great place to be. McMinnville, Tennessee.
Douglas and Lanier, that's where I choose to be. Douglas and Lanier, that's the agency for me.
For rock-solid insurance coverage or sound financial planning for my family's future, Douglas and Lanier is where I choose to call home.
The MyUsage app is a way to conveniently pay online, anytime, day or night. You can also come by any Caney Fork Electric office and sign up for the prepay option available using the MyUsage app. Know exactly how much electricity is used each day and the cost. Best of all, no monthly bill. You can set up email or text alerts, keep track of your usage, and pay your bill, all with the MyUsage app from Caney Fork. Caney Fork Electric, keeping you informed.
Security Federal Savings Bank is always pleased to provide virtually every banking service you could ever need. But more than that, we are proud to offer a relationship with you, your family, or your company. We've been here supplying just what you need and building a trust, a relationship. And that's something hard to find these days. Our bankers are here for you, here to help. If you are interested in a relationship, come to the friendliest bank in town, Security Federal Savings Bank, member FDIC.
Welcome to another edition of Community Insider. Join us as we travel Middle Tennessee, uncovering history and experiencing the adventure of unique stories and events coming to you inside your community.
And so I'm going to start off with a few little Indian stories about downtown and how special it was. And then we'll talk a little bit about maybe the Black House and Dr. Black and some of our experiences there. The murder of his protege and physician partner, Dr. A.B. Ramsey, who was gunned down on Main Street just a few yards from here. And then we'll also talk a little bit about Charles Faulkner Bryan and the Bell Witch and our connection with that story. And then we might throw in some stuff about the triple hangings and a couple of other kind of macabre events that took place downtown that kind of stretched the imagination, so to speak. And so when the white people came, settlers came to Warren County, there weren't really any Native Americans living there. It was Cherokee and Chickasaw hunting grounds, and they fought back and forth for control of it because it was heavy in game. Some of our oldest roads are old buffalo trails. So buffalo was plentiful here. And Cardinal Mountain was known as White Buffalo Mountain. It was a sacred place where there was an altar and an eagle's rock. And so the state has now taken over part of Cardinal Mountain because it's so special. Unfortunately, a lot of people have gone up there and desecrated some of the Indian artifacts that are there, the Native American artifacts, including the altar. So they've chipped it away, and there's not much left out of it. But the state wants to do an interpretation of what that mountain meant to the Native Americans. So this was kind of a special place where there was always water and rivers. You always had large native populations. And so 1,000 years ago, it was probably 20 or 30,000 people living in this area that were Native Americans. And by the time the white people got here, there were virtually none. It was basically winter hunting grounds, and so not many villages and stuff that would support year-round life. Just villages for when the hunting parties would come in and look for game to take back, mostly to northern Georgia, northern Alabama, the area around Chattanooga. And so when the natives departed, disappeared, morphed into the tribes, the civilized tribes. When the white people got here, a lot of Native Americans had anglicized. They'd taken Christian names and been converted, and they lived mostly like white people. Some did, some didn't. Some of my relatives did, and some of my relatives didn't live as white people. But they lived in mostly northern Alabama and in and around Jasper and toward Chattanooga. So when the white people came here, they found lots of artifacts, lots of treasures, so to speak. They didn't know what they were. They found little idols. They found some mummified bodies along the river that had blonde hair and beads and looked Asian or European. It didn't look like Native Americans, and white people didn't know what to make of that. Since there's 4 rivers that converge in and around Warren County, it was a special place. And some of our creeks, like Mountain Creek and Charles Creek and Hickory Creek, are almost as big as rivers anyway and feed into those larger bodies of water. And so there was native populations all in around where fertile ground would allow for people to prosper and to grow corn and to have hunting grounds and stuff. And so it was a big place. It was a special place. So underneath the city of McMinnville is a large network of caverns, which made downtown McMinnville a special place as well. Chief Long White Eagle, who was a friend of my uncle's and worked for the city of McMinnville, his Anglo name was Bill Paisley, was the so-called non-reservation chief of the Cherokee Nation in these parts. And so he had a lot of information that he shared with me about Native Americans and some of their stories. And so Short Mountain was supposed to be kind of a haunted place that possessed a creeper that creeped up and down the creek. They called him the Charles Creek Creeper, or in Indian language it was Choli. And so it became Charlie when the white people came. But there's a devil's hole up there on Short Mountain that cold air bursts out. And the natives were just a little bit suspicious of that particular mountain. And they stayed clear of it because of obvious reasons. They thought it was possessed by demons and bad spirits. And so White Buffalo Mountain, which was Cardinal, was a little bit more special for them, and it was more ceremonial. Ben Lomond Mountain was called Dark Mountain. And so it had a special cave underneath it, supposedly, where the Native Americans held ceremonies and had a secret fort where they could stage raids or hide large amounts of warriors during times of battle. But there's all kinds of artifacts that you find around Warren County. And in downtown, the chief told me that downtown was a ceremonial place as well. It was a special place. It was kind of sacred because of the way the river curved around the city. There was 2 mounds close to the river that they did ceremonies. But up here where the city was supposedly a playing field where they would gather together, particularly during the fall and spring equinox. And if you notice, if you've ever been downtown in the fall and spring, the sun lines up perfectly down Main Street. If you look toward sunrise, it's just right in the middle of Main Street. He said, that's not by just consequence. It's because the Native Americans had their special ceremonies here to welcome in the spring and planting in the fall for harvest as well. So they didn't really live downtown, but they used it as a ceremony, kind of like Stone Fort was in Manchester as well. And so with the cave network here and the mountains, the game that was here, and the previous native population, even the Cherokee thought this was a special place. And even Harrison Ferry was a special place to the Native Americans. So with water and mountains and caves, it said a lot about where Native Americans felt special and told stories. And so when the white people came, a lot of the land was already cleared. The barrens and stuff didn't have a lot of, big trees. It was easy to till and easy to clear, particularly in the bottomlands and along the rivers. And so a lot of the trails that the Native Americans have, particularly the buffalo trails, the white people just used as pioneer trails as well. So it made sense. Why do something that's already basically there? The birthing tree that's out by the hospital is considered somewhat special as well. It's got some stories tied to Native Americans, because there was a buffalo trail. The old Kentucky Road was a buffalo trail that came through here. So there was a huge grove of oak trees that were there even 300 years ago. And so a lot of the natives would stop there and rest. Of course, buffalo would stop there and eat the acorns under the trees. And so it was a special place even for settlers to come in. And babies supposedly were born under there, but there's not really a whole lot of evidence for that. But it's close to the river, huge grove of trees. And so that house that's out there, the Oakham Plantation House, the Marbury House, has a lot of ghost stories kind of attached to that. Not only was it just on the old Kentucky Trail and sitting there on what's so-called Indian lands as well. When that house was built about 1830 and then expanded again about 30 years later by the Marburys, the families that lived there noticed that sounds, footsteps, voices. There's a little cemetery out back where a lot of the family are buried, and some of the enslaved people are buried as well in unmarked graves. But there was a lot of supernatural things. After it became a home for the aged and indigent. William Magnus gifted us the library with a large contribution for its building. He also gave money to the Baptist Church. It became Magnus Memorial. And for the Magnus House, home for the aged and indigent, it's the big plantation house right next to the hospital, right across from the birthing tree. But that house sitting amongst the grove of oak trees there. And so when it was a home for aged and indigent, there was quite a few people that died there. And they talked about hearing sounds and a baby crying when somebody would die that was there. Basically, my grandmother called them inmates. It's not a great word for them, that's what she calls them. But the patients that were there. Some people were there not by choice because they had no family. Sometimes people didn't have any children, didn't have any family, and they would just give their farm or their possessions to the county for the county to take care of them. And so it was a working farm. It's a large farm that's now been carved up into industrial and hospital, and colleges, all kinds of things, the mall, other properties and stuff around it. But in the annex that was built with part of Mr. Magnus's benevolence, where most of the people lived in dormitory type situation, there's a staircase that goes down into a basement. And the basement has always kind of creeped me out. And when we were getting it restored and on the National Register and trying to keep some things or whatever in order out there, we would notice that even when everything was clean, nobody had been in the house. If you would go over to the stairwell that went in the basement, you could see dirty footprints coming up the steps. And you would clean them off, come back a few days later, and then there'd still be footsteps, the footprints right on the steps. Kind of chalky, dirty footprints. Look like a man's shoe. So we don't know who it is. Now that Pure Wealth is out there, I've asked them about, and they hear stuff, and you do hear a lot of things in old houses. They just become spooky by nature because they're old. And so we don't know, what's going on out there at the Magnus house. There's a rumor that there's people buried in the front yard that might have something to do with it, but we don't have any evidence that happened. There is a family cemetery in the back, however. So we're going to walk down the street toward the Black House, tell a few stories down there, and then walk down Main Street. And so, has anybody got any questions before we go? Everybody want to
Are
bother?
they going to open the Magnus house for tours?
They haven't decided what they're going to do just yet. So we may do a tour out there of the house at some time.
Is it restored?
It's restored. It is.
Okay.
Paul Barnes and VMP Lamp bought it and restored it and got it on the National Register. And so now that it's sold again, we're going to see what happens. It's a wealth management company that's housed there now, but they may lease out space in the annex portion of it for office space and business space for people that want to work online or something. We don't know.